So a few weeks ago, I picked up the HeadRush Looperboard to kind of upgrade my Boss RC-300 live looping setup. And in today's video, I want to talk about whether you should buy the HeadRush Looperboard or whether you should buy the Boss RC-300. Hey, what's up? Hope you're having a fantastic day. Welcome back to another video. Now today, we're going to be talking about the HeadRush Looperboard up against the Boss RC-300. Now I recently did a video reviewing the Boss RC-300 after owning it for 6 years. So if you want to check out my 6 years later review, check out that YouTube card in the corner over here. Now the HeadRush Looperboard came out in 2019, I believe, and the Boss RC-300 came out in 2011. So there's a huge difference between the technical capabilities of the two loop pedals because there's been so many advancements since almost 10 years ago when the Boss RC-300 actually was released. Now the HeadRush Looperboard has some unbelievable modern features that on paper blow the Boss RC-300 out of the water. For one, it's got a 7-inch LCD touchscreen, which I personally have never seen on any piece of music equipment that I have personally owned or tried out or been interested in. And also, it basically has a computer built into the looper pedal. So it's got a quad cortex, which is a quad-core, 4-core CPU built into this looper pedal. So this gives you some unbelievable processing power and some crazy settings that we can actually switch out inside of the touchscreen. And it gives you some unbelievable audio routing options. And we'll talk all about this later on in the video. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about in today's video is actually the specifications of the looper pedal. Now, we're not going to deep dive too much into the specs because, you know, you can find those on a variety of music store websites just by reading the description. But I want to talk about some of the key points that I think are very, very important. And one of those is the audio quality of the looper stations, because both of the loop pedals have a huge disparity in how high of a quality they can output on your loops. Now, the really cool thing about the HeadRush Looperboard is it outputs at WAV 24-bit, which is literally studio grade quality. Your DAWs, your audio interfaces usually have insane quality of this level, and you can really tell there's so much clarity and crispness to your loops, and as you get more complicated in overdub, you're going to hear each of those overdubs. Now, on the Boss RC-300, it's pretty weak in the audio department. It only outputs at MP3 16-bit, which is a very dated format in my opinion, and you can really tell the degradation when you're doing very detailed looping. So for example, if you're maybe doing electric guitar looping, you've got a beautiful guitar tone setup, a little bit of distortion, things like that. And when that goes into your looper pedal, it totally destroys the tone, and there's a huge difference between the quality of the original guitar sound and the quality coming out of the Boss RC-300. And that's in fact why I originally upgraded to the Boss RC-505, because that outputted at WAV 16-bit, so it was a huge increase from MP3. But the HeadRush Looperboard takes it to the next level with WAV 24-bit, which is definitely appreciated. Now, another important point to raise about the spec sheet is to do with the actual recording of a loop process. Now, I talked about how the HeadRush Looperboard has 24-bit WAV, which is fantastic for doing lots of overdubbing to keep that clarity on the loop pedal. Well, when it comes to recording and overdubbing on the two loop pedals, there's a huge difference in the approach that they both take. Now, the Boss RC-505 allows you to do unlimited overdubs on the loop pedal. So that means you can record your first loop and just overdub as many times as you like, and every time it's going to record that information. However, on the HeadRush Looperboard, you are restricted to a maximum of 99 overdubs, or what they like to refer to as 99 layers. Now, in my honest opinion, I can never ever see myself exceeding 99 overdubs on a single loop track. I just could never see myself doing that. But maybe if you were doing ambient looping, that sort of soundscape stuff, and you do huge loops and you do lots of layers, then you may want unlimited overdubs. So let's talk about the layout and design of the two looper stations. And let's first talk about the sexy HeadRush Looperboard. Now, this has got to be one of the most prettiest loop stations I've ever seen, and it looks super sleek with a really stealth black approach to it. Very modern as well, with the sort of modern aesthetic that we like with our technology. Now, first thing I was not a huge fan of was the foot switch layout of the HeadRush Looperboard. This actually deterred me from purchasing the loop pedal for a very long period of time. However, when they released firmware 2.0, which I did a video about over here, talking about all the new features, if you want to learn more about that, they actually allowed you to customize the foot switches to another level, which sort of mitigated and removed this issue that I personally had with the pedal. Now, once I'd found a fix for the problem with the looper foot switches that I was personally having, I soon actually adapted and really enjoyed the way the HeadRush Looperboard's workflow presented itself. Because one really cool thing we can do is we can reassign these foot switches altogether so that stop command thing doesn't really even become a problem. So let me tell you what I mean by this. So by default, these foot switches here are set up to just be start and stop. So if I just recorded a loop, I could stop and start with this foot switch over here. However, inside of the menu, I can actually switch these out to do stuff like clear a loop track. So this could clear track 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So a clear all foot switch. I could reassign foot switch 2 to turn on my effects. I could turn this one to do something else like undo, redo on a specific loop track layer. So it basically gives you shortcuts to do other commands that you previously had to dive into multiple different menus in order to access, which I am a huge fan of indeed. Now, something else that I'm a huge fan of with the HeadRush Looperboard's layout is the fact the all start and all stop foot switch is located nowhere near any volume knobs. Now, the problem with the Boss RC-300 is the master output level is right next to the all start and all stop foot switch. So if you miss the all start and all stop foot switch by mistake, you can sometimes accidentally basically kick that master volume output level and it'll just crank itself to almost full and it'll blast the audience, and it's very difficult to make that mistake look discreet because you basically just ramped up the volume inside of the venue. Now, that was something that I don't really like about the layout of the all start and all foot switch on that loop pedal. And also, you also have to like lift up really high to go up onto the second shelf of the RC-300 to hit that foot switch. So it's basically all down to how well you can actually balance. Well, the HeadRush Looperboard has this in a really convenient position, which I am a huge fan of. However, because these foot switches are nice and economically laid out, so they're really close to one another, so you have very minimal foot movement, there is another problem that's presented with that, and that's sometimes accidentally catching a foot switch. So with the effects foot switch here, let's say I'm diving into my effects to turn on an effects rack or something like that, and then I exit out of my effects. Something I've done numerous times is I've accidentally clicked my effects foot switch and also caught my foot on the tap tempo button, and it's changed the tempo of my loops, which essentially has just destroyed my entire performance, because there's no way of me returning these loops back to their original state unless I tap it back in absolutely perfect as to how I had maybe recorded them in free time. And that's something that was a huge problem that I kept noticing, was the fact that I would accidentally catch my foot on this tap tempo thing, especially while I was getting used to the pedal. Now, something that you may have noticed that's on the Boss RC-300 that isn't present on the HeadRush Looperboard is an expression pedal. Now, the Boss RC-300 comes with a built-in expression pedal that you can reassign to do other functions inside of the menu. Now, by default, this is just set up to control the onboard effects, and this segues us beautifully into the loop effects on both of the looper pedals. Now, the Boss RC-300, in my opinion, they're very restrictive. You can only have one loop effect on at any given time. Now, there's loads of different loop effects to actually choose from, but I don't personally think they sound very good. I tried them out and then I never used them ever again. Now, the only ones that I personally like is the transpose one's pretty useful. So you can like transpose your loop up and down an octave by using the expression pedals. You can go down, up, things like that. And also there's a guitar to bass effect. So it turns your guitar into a bass guitar and it sounds all right, but the tracking of the notes is a little bit hit and miss. So you sometimes get great results, you sometimes don't get great results. It's just not got much consistency, hence why I don't use it. Now, the way we turn our loop effects on is with this little foot switch here. So we click that in, and then by default, it will turn the transpose effect on that we would control with the expression pedal. Now, the way we then scroll through these effects is you can either use this button here inside the loop effects thing, and then you can start scrolling through the type or whatever in the categories through here, which is one way to go about doing it. But obviously you'd have to physically stop your performance in order to do that. Well, what you have to do is instead is you have to hold this foot switch in for 2 seconds to go into the pedal function mode, and then you can use these foot switches here to scroll through the effects types. You can see we're going through modulation, voice, stuff like that. And then when you find the guitar to bass, for example, you can then click this foot switch in and you can turn your guitar into a bass. Now you can see that's a very inefficient and elongated process, and it can be very stressful as well when you're playing on stage, scrolling through pages and pages of effects on this little titchy-witchy LCD screen. Well, if we compare this to the HeadRush Looperboard, the HeadRush Looperboard has this effects rack approach. So you can create up to 4 different effects racks. So you can have one for your voice, your guitars, drums, whatever you're inputting into the loop pedal. And then inside of each of these effects racks are multiple different effects. So it could be delays, compression, EQs, reverbs, things like that you can then change the individual parameters of each effect. Now this gives you insane versatility inside of the loop pedal's built-in effects that actually sound surprisingly very, very nice. Now, although there's a lot of versatility with the effects racks on the HeadRush Looperboard, there's also a huge limitation within the effects racks options. Now, inside of each effect rack are multiple individual effects, so delay, reverbs, compressions, EQs, and inside of each of those effects in the effects rack, you can switch out the parameters, which is insane. There's a lot of detail you can do when customizing the parameters of the effect, how long your reverb is, how big the delay is, things like that. But the problem is you cannot switch out the effects within the effects rack. So what I mean by that is, let's say you boot up an effect and you do not want the noise gate, because I very rarely didn't have any intended purpose for that noise gate. So I would have much rather have switched out that effect within the rack for something that was a little bit more useful for the application that I wanted to use it within. Well, the problem is you cannot change the effects within the rack. You basically have to boot up the preset, and whatever preset has the effects within, you have to work with those effects, which I found very, very annoying, because although there was lots of customization to be done, you couldn't do something so simple as to basically switching out an effects pedal within the effects rack, which really did irritate me. Now, if you're enjoying today's video, definitely give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing, because I've got my full review of the HeadRush Looperboard coming out in a few weeks' time. My final verdict of this pedal, regardless of how it kind of compares in these shootout videos, just was this loop pedal any good and is it worth the money? So turn the notification bell to on so you get notified when I upload that video. And also comment down below if you have any specific questions about the HeadRush, and I can hopefully answer them in that video. So we're now going to talk about the audio routing options on the 2 loop pedals. Now, the Boss RC-300 has got the best audio routing options out of the entire Boss RC loop pedal lineup, and that includes the Boss RC-505. And the reason why this has better options than the RC-505 is because there are 4 output jacks that we can use. We have the main left and right out, and we have the sub left and right out. And then there's also the headphones. But we'll talk about why I'm not too keen on the headphones on the RC-300 in just a moment. Now, the HeadRush Looperboard matches the RC-300 exactly the same in this department. It has 4 output jacks and also a headphone out. Now, the really interesting thing about the HeadRush Looperboard is it has XLR out. So it's got 2 jack outputs, so your standard guitar jack cables, and then it also has 2 XLR outputs. Now, the benefits of having the XLR outputs is the fact we can do a ground lift inside of the settings. And what this means is we can turn a specific setting on that will enable our HeadRush Looperboard to remove any unwanted sounds that may be picked up on the cable, like white noise, clicks, hisses, stuff like that, if a building hasn't got very good isolation. Now, inside the audio routing tab on the HeadRush Looperboard, we have so many different options to customize how the audio routing happens inside of the pedal. So we've got input audio routing options, we've got monitoring audio routing options, we've got track options, and then we also have some output options. Now, If we take a look at the track options, this is where it gets super exciting with the looper pedal. So we can specify which input on this side of the pedal goes to which loop track. So for example, right now inputs 1 and 2 are going to all 4 of the loop tracks, but we can switch this out to be, let's say for example, input 1 goes to track 1, input 2 goes to track 2, input 3 goes to track 3, and likewise input 4 goes to track 4. So we can specify each loop track to have its own instrument input. So this could be vocals, drums, guitar, piano, whatever you want to do with your looping. And that's something we cannot do with the Boss RC-300. We cannot specify which loop track will receive what audio from which input. Basically, whatever's inputted into our RC-300 will be inputted to all 3 of the loop tracks. There's no way to segregate or separate the inputs going to each loop track, which is a feature that's definitely missed. Some other options we can do with the audio routing on the HeadRush is we can define whether a loop track is stereo or mono. So for example, we could specify track 1 here to be mono, which it currently is. So this means it will output via 1+2 or via 3+4 as a stereo out, left and right via the separate cables. Or we could specify it to be a mono single output. So this means now track 1 will be mono and output only via output 1. So it's now going to be a single cable. Now, because we can specify each loop track to be either stereo or mono individually, this means theoretically we could set up each loop track to be mono, which then allows us to have 4 outs for 4 loop tracks. So for the first time in loop pedal history, we have a consumer grade loop pedal that allows us to send each loop track out on a separate individual cable. So what I mean by this is track 1 could go out via a mono single cable on output 1, track 2 could be outputted via output 2, and 3 goes output 3, and finally 4 will go out of output 4. So now this track, this track, this track, and this track outputs via its own cable that can go to the front of house, and now our mix engineer or whoever's doing the sound on the night, they have the option now to control each loop track volume independently via those cables. Now, unfortunately, on the Boss RC-300, we cannot do something as detailed as this. What I just did on the HeadRush was obviously I specified each loop track to have its own output via a cable on the back of the pedal. So 4 individual cables for 4 individual loop tracks. Now, on the Boss RC-300, obviously we have master main outs and we also have our sub out. Now, we could send our loop track audio out of the sub outs. So tracks 1, 2, and 3 could go out of the sub out separate to our main out, which may be our acoustic guitar sounds or our microphone, for example. So we could separate things that way to give a mix engineer a little bit extra adjustment if they wished, but nowhere near as detailed as each loop track having its own cable. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about why I'm not a fan of the headphone out on the Boss RC-300, and it's only the Boss RC-300, not the Boss RC-505, that I have this issue with. And the issue I have is, for some bizarre reason, on the Boss RC-300, the main out is linked to the headphone out, and I have no idea why they did that, because obviously if I'm performing, I want to send my own tailored mix to my headphones and also have specific things to aid my performance. That may be rhythm tracks, click tracks, count-ins, stuff like that, to help me perform better and more accurately. So I obviously would want to send that to a set of headphones, and I wouldn't want the audience to hear that. I'd want them to hear the final product. Now, for some reason on the RC-300, whatever you send to your headphones will also be sent out of the master main out, which is very, very bizarre, and I have no clue why they did that. And the only workaround to avoid this is you basically have to have a very convoluted setup where you use the sub outs going to a mixer desk, and then you send the mixer desk to like an in-ear monitoring rig with headphones and stuff like that, and then it's just super complicated and defeats the purpose of having a plug and play loop pedal. Whereas with the HeadRush Looperboard, we can do some insane stuff with the headphones. So you can see right here on the track output monitoring, we have these little headphone icons. So I can choose whether track 1 is being sent to the headphones. So when it's yellow, it will be being sent, and same again, I can specify whether the click is outputted via these cables that we just set up for each loop track, or just via the headphones. So you can see I've disabled outputs 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are all disabled, and my click output only goes to the headphones. Now that's just an introduction to how powerful the audio routings are on the HeadRush Looperboard. However, it's not all that perfect, and there's something that the Boss RC-300 is the champion on, and that's how you actually mix the audio routing. Now on the Boss RC-300, we have physical loop track mix faders. So this means we can turn down the loop tracks all the way 1 through 3 individually with its own track mixer fader. And the reason why I love the fact these are physical is because there is a slight click when you hit 100%. So when you hit that center point, the actual fader will kind of click into place and give you a bit of tactile feedback response. So you go, I have nailed it. We are now back at a neutral position. Whereas with the HeadRush Looperboard, although it's super technical and fancy, you just go into navigation, head on over to your mixer. You can see we have this very, very nice accessible menu with our track faders for all the loop tracks, plus our click and backing track player if we're playing any backing tracks. The problem is, if I were to turn down track 1, for example, very responsive, fantastic experience. However, if I want to go back to 0, I have to go back up and be very accurate, to nail that's 100% back at 0. Otherwise, if I'm a bit loose with it, you can see I overshot there. Try that again. Again, I even overshot that once again. So to be super accurate, you have to really slow down and concentrate, which slows down your performance. With the RC-300, you grab the physical fader that you can feel, you push it up, and it clicks into place. Something that HeadRush should implement to remove this problem is a simple double tap feature. So I would love it if I could fade it down and then go, actually, that's too quiet. I want it back where it was, and just double tap, boom, and then it resets itself back to 0. That would have been game changing. Now, on the subject of this mixer view while we're here, something that it does outperform the Boss RC-300 on is its accessibility for more advanced features. So inside of here, we have the option to set up panning. Now we can do track panning on the RC-300 as well, but you have to kind of dive into menus and it takes a long time to actually get that set up. Whereas here, we can do a quick surface level fade, so to the left or to the right for our panning, or we can double tap on this parameter and it enlarges it so we can be even more accurate with our track panning, which I really do like. But it just shows and highlights the power of a double tap feature that would really enhance that mixing process. Now to conclude, which loop pedal do I personally think is the best and which one would I recommend? And I think you need to take a look at it from 2 different perspectives. If you're looking for a loop pedal that you can just simply take out the box and maybe upgrade from something you already own, I'd highly suggest considering the Boss RC-300. Not only is it extremely price friendly compared to the HeadRush being half the price, but it also just simply works out of the box. You can take it out and start creating and looping music straight away. However, with the HeadRush Looperboard, I found the experience to be a little bit overwhelming when unboxing the product. I got it out the box and instantly I had to start diving into the manual and switching out settings in order to get that loop pedal to complement my live looping style. But with that being said, if you're looking for something that will allow you to have unbelievable customization to take your live looping setup to the next level, then you should definitely consider the HeadRush Looperboard due to how advanced the features are and the power available within that loop station. Now, if you're interested in learning about the power available in both of these loop pedals, check out the links in the description down below for my Boss RC-300 and my HeadRush Looperboard Ultimate Guide, where I take you through all of the individual settings so you can get the most out of the loop station that you choose. But as always, I've been Ben Rollins. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.